Welcome to another episode of Startup Stories, the podcast that brings you your weekly entrepreneurship education and startup training by Europe's most inspiring founders. This episode brings us together with David Rohner, founder of Dajoro, a startup that used to produce and sell clothes made out of pima cotton, a cotton that can only be harvested in a small region in Peru and that has gained a reputation for producing a smooth fabric that is soft to the touch, resistant to fraying, tearing, pilling, wrinkling, and fading. David decided to stop working on Dajoro a while ago, but was kind enough to share his valuable experience and learnings with us. I hope this conversation will bring you as much value as it did to me. Enjoy! So, welcome to the podcast. Thanks for taking the time. We really appreciate it. Could we start maybe talking about you, your story, and also what startup are we talking about today?
Yes, sure, of course. So, hi, thanks for inviting me. It's a pleasure. First time that I have actually the chance to speak up, to tell people about my story regarding the startup. So my name is David, and it was around 3-4 years ago that I founded Dajoro, which is a startup in the fair fashion business industry. So it's my own label. I went to Peru for that because they have very special cotton down there, which is only allowed to actually get harvested there and in no other part in the world. And it's also a fair standard, so it complies with all the biologically fair measurements that are out there. And so that was the idea, to combine these two parts together. So first the high quality of the cotton, and second the fairness of the clothes, and bring it together to one product that right now is selling under the brand Dajoro.
Yeah. When did you start that?
So that was around roughly 4 years ago, when I had actually first there was the intention of just creating something, just doing something, and not really probably looking at what's actually needed. But then I figured out very quickly, like after my first travel to Peru, that they have a special cotton. I have never seen a brand here selling this, so I thought that might already be as itself kind of a unique selling point. Then the next step was kind of, but what do you want to do with it? It's a nice cotton, maybe it's a nice product. It might result in a nice product, but there are still some steps to actually fulfill. And so the next thing was, at that time, so 4 years ago, maybe 2014 or something, many people started to talk about fairness, sustainability. And since I already knew that many big sellers are producing in Peru, such as also Swiss sellers, Victorinox, or also big international brands, Polo, Ralph Lauren, or German, one of the first actually German fair trade brand, Hesnatur, are also all producing down there. So I thought there might be this potential of also combining it to this fairness, fair trade standard. So that was actually where it led to my business idea, and also to my kind of third travel down to Peru to actually bring it to on the market.
Yeah, I'm not sure if you already talked about, but could you quickly repeat, why did you go to Peru in the first place?
Yeah, of course. So there wasn't any intention of actually creating something in the first place. There was just like this intention of traveling the world, meeting new cultures, new people, and do some stuff in another part of the world. So I had Spanish classes before, and I thought that's just the best opportunity to go there and like kind of learn a bit more about the language and also their culture. And so that was just a normal travel. I visited some friends of the family that we knew through the travels of my parents, and I could stay there. So it's a perfect opportunity to really go deep into the culture and learn more, which you wouldn't have been able to just by reading books, probably.
Yeah. So, you said so you went down there on the third trip, right?
Yeah.
How did you find your first suppliers? How did you go about that? I mean, you go to another country, you know almost no one.
Yeah.
What did you do? What were the concrete steps you took?
Yeah, that's actually that was quite a challenge, because nowadays we're quite connected with each other, so it's quite easy to actually find. I would say if you're looking for a certain product, you can just type it in Google, and then it just gives you some results.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, there are the suppliers down there, and they really need to be found. So it's not that easy to just type in a name, since you don't even know a name. And if you just search for a supplier, then I mean, most of them don't even have a web page. And there's like this other big problem that many of them have this kind of intermediary. So you actually have to go through the intermediary to actually find an industry, something that is really producing the fibers, or something that is really someone that is really actually producing your product. So there was like this first initial step to actually find this intermediary, but also kind of pass by them and then go directly to the into the market where the products are actually done. So because that was my intention, I really wanted to speak to the people that are actually producing it.
Yeah.
And so the first step that I took was I looked at the other brands that I was just mentioning before that were producing already in the very same spot, and tried to look their YouTube videos, tried to go to their webpage. I even talked to people that are working at Hesnatur and tried to ask them, or try to figure out whether they might maybe want to tell me their suppliers, which of course they didn't want to do.
Yeah.
So I actually went down there with only one address, and I knew that might be at least my first point of contact, where I try to actually sell the idea, and also hope that this kind of first point of contact will then refer me to others. Once there, I very quickly saw that many people, if you just bring up your topic, knew about it, or at least knew someone who's maybe in a related aspect, or related in a certain way to other producers, to people that might know someone else. So it was a big risk going there without really knowing what I'm going to do.
Yeah.
So I didn't have this tight schedule leading me to the next, like from one supplier to the next supplier, and I could just ask them the questions I wanted. So first it was really like, go there, see what happens, and if not, well, then just go back and maybe forget about it.
So how long did it take for you to find someone?
Yeah.
You know, did you just book a flight there and no return flight, or did you give yourself like 3 weeks or a month, or?
I had a very, very limited time. So it was actually my shortest trip to Peru. I've been there 3 times. It was my 3rd time, and I only gave myself a month.
Yeah.
It was enough. Well, okay, I have to mention that I kind of missed my flight. So it was
What's kind of missing a flight? What does that mean?
That means there was just this big traffic jam. So I would say it wasn't my fault. I would say it's the fault of the traffic.
Yeah.
But I had a month and a day, so
Okay.
which was enough. Yeah. So yeah, no, I mean, if you go down there, and that was maybe the thing I wasn't really prepared for, and just look what's actually approaching you, then you also face the risk of just like kind of losing the time and not really be able to produce something.
Yeah.
So I at least had this one point of contact. I also started to produce something with them. Asked them whether they could do a sample for me within this month, because if the period ended, then I had to actually kind of ship that sample to back home, which is just like connected with big costs, freight costs. So there were some kind of sleepless nights, again kind of, because I mean I knew I was there and I also wanted to have a bit of fun, but on the same side I really wanted to show myself that there is an option, and I'm actually gonna find this option to produce something. Yeah.
And so in the end, how long did it take you to have, to find the producer that in the end produced for you?
So I made samples. So usually you ask them to do the sample for you, so you see how they work, how they actually take it serious when you trying to show them. And if you see, and that's something that you see very quickly, if someone is really putting time into it, is really willing to work with you, or if it just sees you as a kind of, I would say, rich foreigner, just tries to, or he tries to fool. So that's something that you see very quickly. And so it took me still quite a while. It took me the full month that I was down there. But on the other hand, you see very, on first, I would say, point that you actually getting in touch with someone if the person is really willing to get in deeper, puts his commitment into your idea.
Yeah.
So how long did it take me? I would say, as I said, like the first point of contact that I had is still of one of my suppliers. and there is another one. So there are actually two at the moment. And the other one I really just found kind of as a coincidence, because it's I ran out into someone who knew him, and suddenly there was this phone call. So my phone just started to ring, and it was this second supplier. He called me and he was like, "Hey, I just heard that you're actually looking for someone who might know where to produce pima cotton." And he just recently started something, and he was also an intermediary, of course, but he could link me to the company that was producing it. So that was, Peru is in the fashion industry. So if you're just, I would say, walking the right streets, then and talking to some people, they also have an incentive of contacting you, of getting back to you. So yeah.
Right. And then these producers kind of produce the fabric.
Yeah.
That you could use, and then what is the next step in the value chain? What did you do afterwards?
Yeah, so
like in the end, you need a proper shirt or sweater or whatever, right?
Of course. So instead of like thinking maybe to the end of the product, I actually took a step back, and I went to visit the fields where they actually harvest the cotton, and so I went to Piura, which is up north. And they also have this big cotton company called Piura. I forgot about the name, but it's something with Piura. So they really produce this kind of cotton, the pima cotton. Yeah. And it's a very limited kind of cotton. So if you're not producing it in this very same region, it actually loses its name. So if, for example, Americans try to actually bring the very same seeds to their country, but then it just loses the name, it's not pima anymore, but super pima. And this is a special law that is actually put into place in Peru. Yeah. So in this region, I wanted to actually see where it's growing, and also take pictures with the farmers to actually see the whole value chain, kind of from the beginning to the end. But that was more for a personal fulfillment. And so the next step in, like, if you're at a point producing and then want to look to the future, the next point was really like producing this one sample. So you see whether they understood what you're were trying to tell them, whether they really understood your idea, and also to see whether there is something that you might has the chance of actually surviving on the market.
So how you just said you produced at full scale, and the samples that you got, is that so the producers, did they make the shirts and everything already? Yeah. So and how, like, where did they get the designs from? Did you design the clothes, or how did that work?
Yeah, so that's also something that it's of course very kind of interesting question, because I actually asked it myself at a very, very late moment. I was there and I thought it's so easy to actually produce a sweater, because to be honest, more or less they all look the same. They have this 2 sleeves, and you kind of have to enter it, and that's it. That's a sweater.
There's a big hole and a smaller hole.
Exactly. Yeah, and I mean, and we all have more or less the same size of a head, so don't make a big mess out of it. But it's actually not that easy. So, for example, in this fashion industry, they have the so-called spec sheets. So it's just a technical sheet where you list all the not just the size, but also the kind of the endings of your sleeves, or all the very, very little details that actually a producer needs to know. Otherwise, it's just kind of lost. And I mean, just by explaining your idea doesn't mean that you're actually getting what you're trying to explain. So that spec sheet is kind of your security, because you can then refer to it and say, look, you did it differently. Yeah. So I had to first find someone who's actually able to do such a spec sheet. I was in Peru. I had this limited amount of time, and I went to a university, building our new fashion designers, and asked whether someone is interested in kind of just spend some time with me, and I would then try to explain my idea, and they would just put it into these spec sheets, which they were actually able to use. They had the software on their computer and everything. So kind of out of a very lucky coincidence, I got to know someone, and she then started to help me. And she also received a sweater, and I'm very thankful for her help. Otherwise, it wouldn't have happened.
Yeah. How many different designs have you done? I mean, I'm wearing one sweater right now, And I know there was a T-shirt, and how many designs did you have in the end?
So in my mind, I probably had 100,
Yeah.
and then really like able to sell them on a bit bigger scale. I had maybe, well, it's hard because there always were new ones coming in, but around, I would say, for men maybe 4 products, and for women also about 4 or 5 products. But I have samples for like 20 more. I also wanted to do underwear and and dresses for women, for example. So there's like the market potential is insane, and I still have this sweaters, still in contact with the companies, but the part that got more difficult was the part of actually selling it. Even though if you think you have a solid product.
Yeah. I mean, we can go to the selling part.
Definitely, I think that's very interesting now because you started to talk about it so often now. Yeah, what did you try? I mean, you said that it was difficult for you.
Yeah.
What did you try? How did you create the demand for your products?
Yeah. So I just had this big hope that well, nowadays many people start to do a startup, and it's very cool because it's accessible. It's very yeah, you just have something in your mind and you just try it out, and that's cool about it. But then there, with the supply, there needs to be a demand, and this second part I kind of forget about. So and to be able to actually, I would say, build this demand, because there are so many products already on the market. You need to be able to sell it, to market it, and that was a part where I'm very bad in, and that was a big, maybe I would say, learning or something that I learned myself a little bit better. That it's not that easy to actually tell, even just to your friends, that you think you have the best product, because if you don't convince them, or if you're not convinced that you have the best product, then nobody will sell it. And that's already something that I kind of struggle. I don't want to convince people or just kind of put something in their mind, and then it's my word, and if it's not what I actually promised them, then it's then they will kind of start to ask about whether my word is really counting.
Mm-hmm.
So that was just a part that I'm bad in. I think that many other people might be a bit better, and they should have maybe teamed up. But what I started to do is to kind of outsource it. So I asked shops whether they could actually kind of do that part for me. I had 2 or 3 shops at the beginning that were willing to take some of the products into their shop, but with this kind of special requirement. So they needed to have a certain amount of sales to actually let my stock in their market. Otherwise they would just kind of give it back, and that was it. And that was kind of what happened, because I think even though you have it in a shop, even though people see it, it's not that easy that they're going to buy it. And another part was internet selling. I tried to do it on my own. No chance. Nobody buys your clothes on your shop, because people first they want to see it, they want to touch it, or if they already know a brand, then it's okay for them. But if they never had the chance to touch it, see it, and they don't know you, nobody's going to buy it. Yeah. So I switched to a marketplace that already existed, Fair Customer, which is also the first marketplace in Switzerland that sold the iPhone, the Fair produced iPhone. Or not iPhone, just smartphone.
Yeah. The Fairphone. It's
Fairphone.
It's called Fairphone.
And so that was kind of the, I would say, for me it was a big opportunity to place the products there, and that's something that I would say as a maybe advice for other people who try to do something similar. First, get to know your sellers, the people that you think will then actually sell the product for you, and don't start with the product. That would be my advice.
Start selling before you have the product.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. We had one thought and question was so there's a lot of more and more social businesses coming up.
Yeah.
And we've also played with a couple of ideas, and we see the challenge in communicating these, long-term non-monetary benefits.
Yeah.
Like it's sustainable, it's fair, and so on. That's like non-monetary benefits. It's cheaper, or it's really benefits that the customer doesn't feel immediately. How did you go about communicating these and putting them front and center in your?
Yeah. So I was confronted by kind of two options. The first was like really putting everything on this fair standard and selling it under this fair brand. So telling people that kind of if you're not buying my stuff, then you're actually supporting this, as you maybe would say, this kind of bad producers, the producers that actually just make profit out of their employees or just have bad conditions, working conditions. But I try to focus a bit on another level, trying to say that it should be normal to produce on a fair standard, at least in a country that we're living in. We don't have to maybe look on both sides of the coins all the time, but like should be willing to actually spend a bit more for maybe products that we think can sustain other parts of the world as well. So that was maybe my approach to it. But about the question, how would you communicate it? I really, well, that is my deep believing that you should actually receive or put that standard on everything that you're kind of producing. So put it as something that is normal. And probably if you communicate it like this, people might also, it might be kind of an eye-opener for them to actually see, well, actually what I'm doing, namely not buying things that aren't fairly produced is not normal anymore. Yeah. So that might be an approach that I would suggest.
Yeah. So really putting it as a standard. Yeah. It's not your unique selling proposition, but that's just normal.
Exactly.
And added to that, it's super soft. It's really high quality and so on.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I think we discussed this as well. I mean, we're working on our own project and we have
exactly
similar thoughts.
Yeah, that's probably pretty the same. Yeah.
What's your? Sorry, do you want to say something?
Yeah, just maybe regarding this fair standards. So since I try to produce this product on a fair standard basis, which at the first moment it looks maybe easy. You think you can produce it. You just go out, look for someone that you think produces fairly or has already this label. But then there is this obligation that you, as a seller, kind of as the last point in the value chain, also is certified by this fair labels.
Yeah.
Which I would say, I mean, as a normal seller, just receiving the products and actually putting them in someone else's hands. So you're not modifying it anymore. You maybe don't even have employees under yourself, or you're living in a country that actually has the fair standard already. I would count many countries in Europe as such countries that already have this fair standard. It's kind of unnecessary in a way, but they still have this requirement. So many of these standards, many of these labels that put the standard, a fair trade standard on your, or a fair trade label on your product, are also kind of seeking out for looking for money, for more money, for revenues. Yeah. So even them or there, you have to be, what's it called? Just look out for maybe that you don't fall into the trap, because it might look that everything is fair, but from what I've experienced is that also they are really trying to get the money out of your hands just by putting their labels on your product, which on the other side I think is not fair. They should.
It's not really.
Yeah. I mean, and so that was kind of a struggle I had with them with the labels, because at first they didn't want to give me this label. They were confirming that I actually have a fair product, but that I'm not allowed to sell it as a fair product, since I, as kind of a company, am not certified by them, and I should actually undergo the whole process and actually pay for it. So, and it just didn't make any sense, and I kind of could convince them, but I saw that even there, you think you're doing something good, and then they, by actually doing something good, I mean, it's in their own, I would say, willing, or in their own incentive, that actually there are more producers selling on a fair trade basis, and I mean really selling, distributing the product. Why should they limit yourself? Why should they start to limit yourself just out of the money reason?
Yeah. So labels actually can make it harder for
of course
for companies to sell
exactly
fair products,
even though they should support you.
I didn't know that. What's your take on how we can solve intangible problems for example, the unsustainable production of clothing, and intangible meaning intangible for the end customer that doesn't really see if the product has been produced fairly or not, and doesn't really see the working conditions. What's your take on how we can solve these problems and and still build a business that makes profit? Is it possible? How
absolutely. I mean, that's maybe the thing. Everything with the internet globalization got a bit more transparent, but also things that you don't want to see got more intransparent instead of just hiding it, telling you a good story, but actually hiding the bad one. So I think the approach should be that you really yourself, as the producer, as the manufacturer, go and make your own story and make it a good one. So go there and look what you see. And that was at least my approach to it. So I really wanted to see from the first seed, from actually the point where the cotton starts to grow, starts to go outside of the air and actually breathes its first fresh air, until it then got to an industry that makes the cotton, the fabric, to actually making the product, to actually putting the color into the already made produced product, to actually shipping it. So I would say go through your value chain and be sure it's your value chain and not the one that you think is yours, but it's actually a different one. Maybe take some pictures, create a story, and why not sell the story as well? And that's the certainty that you have if you're actually selling something on a fair standard. And on the same side, you have, I think, a cool story to tell that people might even make them more willing to actually to get in contact with you, to learn more about everything.
Definitely. I think story is super important.
Definitely.
For things like that.
So to we know that you stopped now with it, right?
Yeah.
And for us, it's very, very curious about the reason why you actually stopped, and in the end, that's probably the definition of failing, right?
Yeah.
So why did you do that, and what made you do that?
Well, I'm a deep believer in kind of growing by failing. Even though, I mean, who really wants to fail? Nobody. It's a hard fact. So it's kind of a punch in your face if you, at a certain moment, just see that actually the dream didn't come true.
How was this moment? Just to elaborate a little bit on that.
It was a small, hard moment. So it was like every day. I mean, it's not a product that you have kind of this deadline and it just needs to go on that very same day, but it's something that can go for, let's say, years. So it's something that you need to realize. It's a process. At least in my case, it was. It's like if you don't have these orders coming in, then you slowly see that actually the thing that you dreamed of is slowly gonna die. So that was a process, and it was, of course, this one or more or less moment where you decide yourself that you're not going to put more effort into it in order to make this dream come true. So
how did you come to that decision? Like, now I'm not going to invest anymore. But what were what happened before that?
So I told myself that I'm not just gonna let it go just by not doing anything, but the effort that I took was really by already having in mind that I'm not gonna pursue on it anymore. So I asked my recent sellers whether they have any interest of taking the product again into their market with a much higher commission, so that they would get much more out of it than I would. One was interested in that proposition and said, yeah, of course, I mean, let's discuss that. And actually, no, I don't earn anything anymore. And the lady owning the shop, I would say, has this interest in still selling it, since she's now, I would say, able, at least if she sells it, she has something that is going to go to her own hands, which I don't have anymore. On the same side, I try to do the same on this web page. Try to ask them whether I could just kind of give them the product, even though I still own it, but let them decide about it. So all the operative parts, naming the price, discounts, newsletters that are showing the product, and everything else is covered by them. And they also have a much higher fee, a much higher commission on it, which is an incentive for them to sell it. So I put the incentives to my sellers, to my previous sellers, trying to convince them that if they actually still think that there's something that they might be able to do with the product, that they should. So I kind of put it, or try to put it outside of my hands, by raising the incentives for others.
Yeah. Yeah. What was your? Should we go to the learning?
I think we should go there. Yeah.
We wanna. You said in the beginning there's a big gap between what you did and what you would do differently.
Yeah.
And also big learnings probably.
Yeah.
Maybe we can talk about your biggest learning.
Yeah. So my advice, now it's a bit too late to give that advice to myself. So that's maybe the opportunity I have here to actually say what I would do differently, and I would describe it with 2 words. So it's start smart. That means you can come up with an idea, but at that moment it's still only in your mind, and it might be good, it might be very, very valid in the future, but you need to test this, and you need to have the certainty that it's not just in your mind shining, but might also in others. So start smart, and there are many steps that you can take. So maybe just in my case, because we spoke about it, and as you said a bit earlier, maybe start by selling the product before you even have it. And with clothes, it might seem difficult, but there are many options how you could do it. So just by speaking about the samples as I did at the beginning, I could have invested a bit more money in producing the samples, maybe in producing a second sample, which is very costly because you have to send it, to ship it back to you.
Yeah.
But then you have the certainty that it's something that you really like, and not just something that you think, no, I just have to start, because otherwise, who knows, someone is going to steal my idea or whatever. No, you have to be sure that it's something that is really valid. So start by that, and then try to sell this, or try to modify it again if you can sell it. But before producing, before even going to any full-scale production. So in the case of clothes, for example, there are some fairs, some fashion fairs, big ones, smaller ones. I mean, why don't you just invest a bit of money, have your own space there, which is maybe for 2 square meters, maybe 200 Swiss francs for one day or for a weekend, and then you just have your samples, you have everything there, and the people, usually the people from the buying market, the buying office from the different retail companies, passing by, touching your stuff, giving you a feedback, and also maybe even giving you this opportunity to sell it through them. That would be my approach. And if you see that nobody's interested of these people, of course you can say, don't let your dream die and just try it out, but at least you have higher certainty, and maybe already a foot inside of a door of someone who thinks it's a cool idea. Because if you're the only one, then I would say it's going to crash.
Yeah. So with all these learnings, why don't you do it again?
There are some other ideas I have in my mind, and with one that we just recently started to test out, to start smart. We really try to focus on these steps. It's something in the liquor branch, and so we really try to first find our customers, and after that find our suppliers. So that's the approach that we take now.
If you want to share anything about it, what maybe people listening or people we know might be potential customers.
Maybe I just go to touch another topic, but in the very same kind of sphere. So someone else told me, and he's also connected somehow to this new project, told me that he was in the music business before, and it was super hard to actually get in contact with someone who was maybe able to play at a certain concert or wherever. an international player, musician, and you always had to go through the records, kind of the intermediaries in my case, to actually get in contact with these people before the internet. Nowadays it's much easier, and it's the same with friends. It's much easier. You can just call someone, let them know, I really want to meet you, let's do something again. It's super easy. It's a quick chat. But in this case of this friend who was in the music business, he said when he wanted to have someone, he had to put a lot of effort into it. He had to search for it. He wasn't that easy to find his email address. He had to really dig in, maybe have his fax or telephone number, and really put time and effort into meeting this person. Nowadays it's much quicker, but also the rate that you say to yourself, I'm not going to do it, I'm not going to pursue it anymore. It was easy to start, but now it's just let it go, because since I didn't have to put that much effort into it, I can also just let it go. Makes the failure rate, I would say, much bigger. It makes the entrance rate bigger, but also the failure rate much bigger. And that's something that you should maybe focus a bit more on. That's just, even though it seems easy, try to really start and put effort into it. Put a big effort into it.
Yeah.
And also the people that you're working with, they will see that you put a big effort into it.
Yeah.
And they then have this commitment in supporting you. If they see it was just easy for you, you just wanted to start and you wanted to make a big success, it's harder for you to find someone that's actually gonna sustainably keep following you, keep pursuing on making your dreams coming true.
Yeah. I mean, that's the point. It's actually Michel and I also discuss this sometimes. Is, how much do you put in? How much work do you put in? And when do you say, okay, we're gonna stop now? Is it? Are we maybe just too not patient enough? Should we put in another 6 months and maybe then it'll work?
Yeah, definitely. Like if you want to go down to the example, like we also had an idea and we quickly built the prototype of it. It was super easy to do, and then we tried to find customers as a first step, kind of, and we couldn't find them. And then it was exactly this situation, kind of, how long are we going to continue finding customers? And then we asked ourselves, are we not patient enough that we want to stop now, or what is happening actually? Yeah. So I think that was the very difficult part about it.
Yeah. So your point, put in more time than you think.
Well, you always have to be realistic. You have to have both aspects in mind. So putting the time into it, modify it, get the feedback from the market. So if you have a product that is kind of, I would say, lying dead for 6 months, you don't modify it, maybe forget about it. But if you have the feedback and you know what you should do better, and people are actually willing to probably use it in a certain way, put the effort, not by waiting, but by modifying your product. So the effort has to result by doing something. So it's an active effort, not a passive one, but just waiting until the customer is coming. If you don't find a customer in 6 months, didn't modify it, there is just a much I'd say smaller chance of actually making it to a success.
Yeah. All right. I mean, we've covered I think the first 2 questions of the 3 questions.
Yeah, I thought so too. Yeah.
We have one last question. If you don't want to talk about the liquor business, we have one last question. What is the last book or blog post or article that you read, and why would you recommend it?
All right. So, all right, cool. So the very last book, and I have it here in my bag with me, is called Tipping Point, and it's all about this psychological aspect in humans, and the tipping point is actually something that is very much related to any other product as well that you're trying to sell. So it's that point where something suddenly and kind of out of your control just becomes successful, and it's explaining why it happens, and maybe also how you can force it or make it happen. So tipping point is a trend, for example. How trends get created? What are the parts that make a trend actually going to happen. And that's interesting. It's hard because what the book, at least from what I've read so far, tries to tell you is that you're not in full control over it. Of course, you can influence it, but then again, it divides people in kind of 3 different types, and one of them is the seller. So they just have this very interesting story that they tell about, but I might quote it a bit wrongly, but I just try my best. So that's about this revolution happening in the US against the British people on the East Coast, so near, I guess, Boston it was, where they had the British one had their camps and actually wanted to suppress the English, the folks, the people living there back at that time, which actually led to the American Revolution. And apparently they were like these 2 guys seeing that the British were actually getting prepared for war. What they did is they went to their horses and just started to ride to the nearest villages, and from one village to the next village to the next village, trying to spread this message. And what happened is that one guy was really successful, and he actually was able to convince, I mean, that was the notice, hey people, the English people are coming, they're actually going to prepare themselves for war, and they're actually going to invade you or attack you. Go and grab your arms. They might be there tomorrow. And the other guy did the same, but at different villages. Later on, or at least the next morning, they started to invade. The American Revolution started, and very, very specially, some villages were able to defend themselves, and the others were not. And some people kind of trying to understand this problem, they said, yeah, maybe these villages were just kind of pro-British, pro-Britain, and the others weren't. That's the only logical thing that might have happened. And later on, or at least the book tries to convince the reader that the message was the same, and the villages were actually covered by both. But probably one of them wasn't just able to convince the people on the same level than the other one was. So at the end, the marketing and everything is not just about the message, what you say, but how you say.
Yeah. Cool story.
It's a very cool story.
Yeah, definitely good story. Yeah. Very interesting. I also thought about the tipping point. You know, we talked about this illustration of like where you have a mountain like this, and before you reach this tipping point, you kind of, it's like you're a little man putting up a big rock up to the top of a mountain, and at the moment when you reach it, like you're kind of going down there, and there's a lot happening without your influence, kind of, and you're just selling everything to everyone.
Exactly.
So
yeah. The Tipping Point: How Little Things Can Make a Big Difference by Malcolm Gladwell. You can find it on Amazon. Yeah. Very cool. Thanks so much for sharing. Is there anything we missed that you wanted to tell young and aspiring entrepreneurs?
Well, I mean, I would love to actually continue. It was a big pleasure speaking with you. I guess you're also people with brilliant minds, having a lot of ideas in your minds. But on the same side, I don't want to bore people, so I think we should come to an end.
All right. Well, thanks so much for your time and for sharing that story. Are there any of your clothes somewhere that people can get or buy? Because I really love that sweater. I'm wearing it right now. It's so soft. And if they were anywhere, people could get
rare.
it.
Yeah, they're
very expensive now because they're so rare.
Exactly. Yeah, it's because I don't have an influence on the prices anymore.
Right.
Yeah. True. Out of the operating business. Fair customer. Yeah, it's a cool site, not just because of my products, but also because of the other products. So if you need a gift, something for your parents, girlfriends, whatever, you try to find something there. Sure.
All right, and you can find it there.
Yeah.
Okay. Awesome. Faircustomer.ch. I just put it up. Cool. Thanks so much, and good luck with your next idea.
All the best.
Thanks. Same to you.
Thank you so much for listening to another episode of Startup Stories. Make sure to check out the show notes and our blog post with additional links at nerdentrepreneurs.com. And if you like our podcast, leave a review on iTunes. Thanks, and see you next time. Cheers!